White Americans are Americans who identify as and are perceived to be white people. This group constitutes majority of the people in the United States. As of 2019, it numbers about 236,475,401, or 72.0% of the population. Non-Hispanic whites totaled roughly 191,697,647, or 57.8% in the 2020 census. White Hispanic and Latino Americans totaled about 38,277,289, or 11.8% of the population in 2019. European Americans are the largest panethnic group of white Americans and have constituted the majority population of the United States since the nation's founding. The United States Census Bureau uses a particular definition of white that differs from some colloquial uses of the term. The Bureau defines white people to be those having origins in any of the original peoples of Europe, the Middle East, or North Africa. Within official census definitions, people of all racial categories may be further divided into those who identify as not Hispanic or Latino and those who do identify as Hispanic or Latino. The term non-Hispanic white, rather than just white, may be the census group corresponding most closely to those persons who identify as and are perceived to be white in common usage. Similarly, not all Hispanic, Latino people identify as white, black, or any other listed racial category. In 2015, the Census Bureau announced their intention to make Hispanic, Latino a racial category similar to white or black, with respondents able to choose one, two, or more racial categories. This change was cancelled during the Trump administration. Other persons who are classified as white by the U.S. Census but may or may not identify as or be perceived as white include Arab Americans and Jewish Americans. The largest ancestries of white Americans are German, Italian, Scottish, Norwegian. However, the British Americans' demography is considered a serious undercount as the stock tend to self-report and identify as simply Americans, due to the length of time they have inhabited the United States, particularly if their family arrived prior to the American Revolution. The vast majority of white Americans also have ancestry from multiple countries. Definitions of who is white have changed throughout the history of the United States. The term white American can encompass many different ethnic groups. Although the United States Census purports to reflect a social definition of race, the social dimensions of race are more complex than census criteria. The 2000 U.S. Census states that racial categories generally reflect a social definition of race recognized in this country. They do not conform to any biological, anthropological, or genetic criteria. The census question on race lists the categories white or European American, black or African American, American Indian and Alaska Native, Native Hawaiian or other Pacific Islander, Asian, plus some other race, with the respondent having the ability to mark more than one racial or ethnic category. The Census Bureau defines white people as follows. White refers to a person having origins in any of the original peoples of Europe, the Middle East or North Africa. It includes people who indicated their race as white, or reported entries such as German, Italian, Lebanese, Arab, Moroccan, or Caucasian in U.S. Census documents. The designation white overlaps, as do all other official racial categories, with the term Hispanic or Latino, which was introduced in the 1980 census as a category of ethnicity, separate and independent of race. Hispanic and Latino Americans as a whole make up a racially diverse group and as a whole are the largest minority in the country. The characterization of Middle Eastern and North African Americans as white has been a matter of controversy. In the early 20th century, there were a number of cases where people of Arab descent were denied entry into the United States or deported because they were characterized as non-white. In 1944, the law changed, and Middle Eastern and North African peoples were granted white status. In 2015, the U.S. Census endorsed the idea of creating a separate racial category for Middle Eastern and North African Americans in the 2020 census. But this plan was discarded when the Trump administration came to power. In cases where individuals do not self-identify, the U.S. Census parameters for race give each national origin a racial value. Additionally, people who reported Muslim, Jewish, Zoroastrian, or Caucasian as their race, in the some other race section, without noting a country of origin, are automatically tallied as white. The U.S. Census considers the right in response of Caucasian, or Aryan, to be a synonym for white in their ancestry code listing. In the contemporary United States, essentially anyone of European descent is considered white. However, many of the non-European ethnic groups classified as white by the U.S. Census, such as Arab Americans, Jewish Americans, and Hispanics or Latinos may